I think when we talk about Jolani, the best place to start with is his name. I mean, I'm sure you also know, but his actual name is Ahmed al-Sharaa, and people usually know him by his other name, which is Abu Mohammed al-Jolani. But interestingly, what al-Jolani actually refers to is the Golan Heights of Syria. So he is quite
Yeah.
literally the man from Jolan. Now, there's a reason why he changed his name, especially when he embarked on his jihadist journey with Al Qaeda, because he was born in Saudi Arabia, spent 7 years there. His father had a big history of involvement with political Islam, first with Nasserism and then towards a more nationalist uh, inklings of several jihadist groups, especially in Iraq and Syria. But Jolani himself was born in the village of Quneitra in southern Syria. So
Mhm.
when Jolani becomes a part of Al Qaeda after having been radicalized like many others after the Second Intifada in Palestine, he eventually becomes Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's sort of right hand man in Iraq. But interestingly, earlier, Jolani spent quite a lot of time in Iraqi prisons, including the infamous Abu Ghraib prison, where he coincidentally was also jailed with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. But
Mhm.
once Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sort of launches into his own efforts in terms of establishing the Islamic State of Iraq after two of its initial leaders are killed, al-Jolani is sort of dispatched into Syria to establish Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria. However, we see that right from the early 2010s onwards itself, rifts start to show up between Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and Abu Muhammad al-Jolani because Jolani starts thinking, and he expresses this in a letter to al-Baghdadi, who was then about to establish the so-called Caliphate, Islamic State, where he says that Al-Qaeda's ideology-driven globalist approach is not pragmatic and not useful. So right from the beginning of the last decade, you see Jolani becoming a little more focused. Now, eventually, across that decade, he changes the name of his outfit, which was first Jabhat al-Nusra, which is very much a jihadist organization and
Yeah,
was
yeah,
known for its
absolutely.
brutalities. He first changes it to something called the Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, which translates to the movement for the liberation of Sham, or the Levant, which primarily starts in Syria. Uh, Eventually, once Mosul falls and once ISIS is sort of defeated after the Battle of Bahus Farkawi, what Jolani does is goes public with his desire to link up even more integrally with other Syrian rebel factions who are not really Al Qaeda. So he
Mhm.
changes it again to Hayat Tahrir al Sham. But, and I'll conclude with this, by 2019, Jolani issues a very interesting directive to almost all of the rebel fighters and jihadists fighting in the Idlib province in northern Syria that these areas in Syria are not to be used as a staging ground for attacks against European states or any other state in the world. Right. So you have these clear breaks from the Al Qaeda way of doing things. Right.
Mhm.
So while I mean Jolani himself belongs to the Abu Musab al-Zarqawi school of jihadism, so there is no whitewashing his brutality. But in terms of strategic objectives, there's
Mhm.
a very clear chronology in terms of how he deviated from Al Qaeda.